Hello, kia ora. Welcome back to my channel. My name's Renee. I like to read books and then talk about them on the internet. Hi! We're gonna talk August and all the books that I read in August. Finally felt like I was beginning to come out of my little reading slump. The last week of August I did a little reading challenge. Vlog should be coming soon. Perhaps has already been up, I'm not sure. Another thing that happened in August is that I got back on Goodreads. I know, terrible. I'm kind of not enjoying Storygraph. So if you want to follow me on Goodreads, you can, and I'm sorry to anyone that is morally opposed to it. What was I saying? Yeah, I was gonna check to see what exactly I read. I read these 4 books, I know that much, and I think I also finished, I finished 2 books on audio, so let us start with this one, because this is the first book that I read in August, and that was Boulder by Eva Baltasar. Wanted to follow up pretty quickly with this one after reading Permafrost, because I loved that one so much. And yeah, going into this I had pretty high expectations. I'd heard a lot of great things. People talked about how much they loved this book. This was the top of a lot of people's books for 2022 last year, and it was just okay for me. The story I think has probably been described a bit differently to what I would say it is. A lot of it is this woman who is a chef who works on a boat, like big massive freight boats, and it's docked in Iceland, Reykjavik, and she there meets a woman, they fall in love. She becomes quite not obsessive in her love, but it quickly kind of takes over and becomes all that she cares about in the world. So much so that she leaves her life of kind of nomad living and moves in with this woman, starts living quite a normal, conventional life, very different to the one she was leading. And I guess quickly the comforts and the reliability and the just mundanity of long-term relationships takes over, and she begins to question if that is what she still wants in a relationship. A big part of that is that her partner decides she wants to have a baby, and our unnamed narrator, who doesn't have a name but is called Boulder by her partner, the narrator kind of reluctantly just slips into that decision. She doesn't kind of protest or fight. All of that is happening internally and within the book, which I found kind of like frustrating. I think the way this book was kind of pitched to me was there was a lot of questioning around motherhood, which there is a bit of that, but it feels more like she is running away from the idea of a conventional life, a life where things are comfortable and predictable and you aren't kind of charged with that feeling of not knowing what is going to happen next, or being untied or untethered to something else. There is this fear within the narrator that the opposite of that is kind of, in some ways, death. I was interested in that a lot more, but for me this book was just terribly overwritten. I felt like there was just a metaphor after simile. It was just everything was like this or like that or like in the way that things are being described, and it really irks me when I read that in writing. I don't like metaphor after metaphor. I want for whoever it is to be able to just describe accurately what something is and not always be comparing it to something else. I didn't enjoy this one as much. Can't really help that. I'm sorry. That is my opinion. Next, I finished or listened to Vanity Fair Diaries by Tina Brown. I was really looking for something that I could listen to without having to concentrate too much, and I knew I wanted it to be non-fiction, but I still wanted it to be like interesting enough that I could play it and listen. And Tina Brown reads this book herself, so I think that had a massive part to play in why I enjoyed it so much. Anyway, what this book is Tina Brown was the editor of Vanity Fair in the 80s through to the late 90s, and she really kind of turned that magazine around. It was a failing magazine, losing lots of money for Condé Nast, and didn't really have like a proper identity. It was kind of confused, and she is praised highly for the way she was able to really give that magazine an identity and make it profitable. And so these diaries are her diaries of that time. In the beginning, she gives like a bit of a brief biography to herself, like her family, how she grew up, a little bit of time at school, and then some of her time as the senior editor for Tatler magazine, which is a UK magazine that was kind of a bit similar to, I guess, what Vanity Fair is, and was how she kind of became known enough to be poached from that job for the Vanity Fair one. Yeah, I loved this. I loved the kind of gossipy New York, fast-paced, journalistic magazine world that we're in. Obviously, the magazine world and industry has changed a lot since that time. Writers are not getting paid as much, obviously. Published magazines aren't as big as they used to be. So yeah, there was something quite fun about traveling back in time to a more, I don't know, glamorous era for magazines. I guess it would have somewhat been their heyday. I don't know. I don't claim to know much about that, but it was fun. I enjoyed it, and it was exactly what I needed from an audiobook. And yeah, one that I just really enjoyed kind of having on in the background. It's a bit like a podcast to me, I feel. Okay, the next 3 books I kind of speak about in my vlog that I am hoping I will have published by this point, so that you're not seeing all of this stuff out of order. So I'm not going to go in depth too much. I decided to pick up short books because I wanted to try to kickstart some good reading habits, and it really worked, and the books all just so happened to be great. The only annoying thing is that these books are going to be split across 2 months, because these ones I read in August, and then the other ones I read at the very beginning of September. So yeah, you're going to be kind of getting repeated content close and then far away from each other. Anyway, the first one that I read was In the Act by Rachel Ingalls. This was so fun. I have not read Rachel Ingalls' Mrs. Caliban, but I cannot wait to read that, because from what I can tell from that blurb for that book and what I've heard about it, they're probably dealing with a lot of similar themes of domestic life, marriage, these kind of traditional roles that are assumed in long-term marriages, and the just satisfaction of these spouses and these relationships. This is so fun. I loved it so much. We have all those themes in this. We have a couple who are really not happy with one another, and it's become evident by the husband's very serious work that he is doing in their home, in his attic laboratory, in which his wife is not to know anything about. One day, after kind of becoming very frustrated with his constant critiquing of her and the work that she does around the house, she decides to go into the attic that she's never been allowed to go into and see exactly what it is that he's working on. And from there, madness ensues, and it was weird and wonderful and a delight, and for such a small book, packed in a lot of really interesting themes and ideas, and was just super funny as well, but has this kind of timelessness to it with what it is dealing with. Themes of technology and I guess AI and the sex industry and beauty standards, particularly for women, the ways in which men kind of assume these personalities for certain relationships. It's funny and fun, and I really loved it. Then I finished a poetry collection, Poūkahangatus by Tayi Tibble. She is a Māori poet, and this was also a very fun read. I spoke about this being my favourite kind of exploration of contemporary Māori identity, and when I read things like this, I feel hopeful for future generations, and it is, yeah, really uplifting to be able to read something and not have it be, I guess, steeped in a lot of trauma or anger a lot of the time. There is acknowledgement of that and that existence for some people, for some Māori, but overall I felt this was very uplifting and optimistic and just beautiful, very mature and wise for such a young writer, and yeah, I just really loved it. She has another collection, a newer one than this, that I have on my shelf that I will be definitely getting to soon. But yeah, really loved it. Stunning artwork on the front. Yeah, beautiful collection. Cannot recommend enough. I think in between that book and this book, I finished another audiobook by Tina Brown. I do think I spoke about it in that vlog very briefly, but yeah, I was kind of on a Tina Brown kick. I was like, okay, what else has she done? And then I remembered the Palace Papers, which came out recently, and it's not something that I ever would have picked up, but after listening to her Diaries, I was like, this woman can tell me whatever she wants and I will believe it as gospel, so let's do it. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was, again, like listening to an extended podcast. It is a comprehensive look at the Windsor family and their role as a family throughout history, from Queen Elizabeth through to modern day. And we're really looking at individual members of the Windsor family, those that have come in through marriage, those that have been born into this family, and we're really getting a peek behind the scenes as to what really went on. I put that in quotation marks because who is to know? You know, Tina Brown is a journalist, and I'm sure she has journalistic integrity, but I don't know. I'm always just a bit skeptical of these like royal sources and stuff like that. But a lot of it was interviews that she was doing herself from these people, so I don't know. No doubt she made sure she did her due diligence. Yeah, it was great. It was very gossipy. It made me care about a family that I would in the past not care for at all, which was something. I won't say that it was great, but it definitely got me hooked. And yeah, I managed to get a question correct on an episode of the Chase. If you don't know what the Chase is, one of the best quiz shows in the world. Yeah, because of this book. So yes, thank you, Tina Brown. And yeah, it was just a bit of fun, kind of informative, but also just not very serious in my eyes. It was fun to learn all about them. The last book that I read in the month of August, and I read it finished it on the last day, was The Employees by Olga Ravn. This was my favourite book of the month by far. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it so much. It kind of brought together everything I love to read in a book, and then further pushed past beyond the book itself and had me kind of deep diving into stuff in the real world, which I love. I love to be able to kind of geek out to that kind of stuff. But yes, this book essentially is kind of a sci-fi futuristic novel set in a world where people have been taken from Earth, humans have been taken from Earth to work in outer space on their ships, and they kind of say goodbye to their old lives and enter this world as workers. And on the ship there are humans, but there are also humanoids who are like humans, they look like humans, but they obviously don't have any of the life experience or memories. They are robots, and they work together on the ship to perform whatever this project is that they've been kind of called to do. There's been some kind of incident on the ship that has meant that people have had to step in and kind of assess what is going on between the humans and the humanoids and what is making people behave a bit strangely. We also have these objects that have been recently introduced to the ship, and some of the workers' jobs are to take care of these objects and clean them, tend to them, move them around, kind of position them, hang them, all that kind of stuff. And we're getting like interesting responses about how they're kind of interacting with these objects, what the objects are making them feel, how they feel towards them, particularly from the humanoids, which is interesting. Yeah, it's speaking to a lot of things: capitalistic work, what it means to work, how we get satisfaction from work, how we can separate ourselves from like who we are as people and what we are as workers. It speaks a lot to what it means to be human and how we hold on to memory and how that can easily be kind of wiped when you step into this kind of working world. So many things came up for me in this book, and I just really thought that it was brilliant. Again, because of how few pages this book manages to set that all in, but also just the way that it's done it. Olga Ravn originally wrote this as a piece to go alongside of an art installation created by a Danish artist. I did further research into that because I've obviously found that quite interesting, and I wanted to see what the installation looked like, and upon seeing the installation I can say that the objects that are described in this book that the workers are taking care of are actually artwork. Yeah, Olga Ravn goes further into that and says that her inspiration for this was to write about the workers in the gallery looking after these pieces and what that would look like. Loved that so much. It just gave it extra layers and depth for me. I've probably not talked about this well enough, but hopefully you kind of understand that it's brilliant and that you should read it. I think I spoke about this better in my vlog, so you should just go watch that and I won't look as dumb in this talking about it. That is everything that I read in August. Quick one, but I read 6 books. We got there. and I am feeling pretty good about my reading now that we're getting into like the later half of the year. Oh my god. But yeah, I encourage you that if you're in a reading slump, read some tiny books. It definitely helps and it'll make you feel good, and you'll probably read some really good stuff because tiny books are superior in my opinion. Have a good day. I'll see you next time, and I love you a lot. Bye.